My wife secretly siphoned $250, $0 from our joint account to fund her affair with my best friend, then filed for divorce claiming I was abusive. And now she's trying to take our house and savings, claiming I only got the property in the divorce settlement. But I just found out she's been hiding even more money in an offshore account. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here telling a story like this, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Honestly, I still can't believe the mess I'm in. It all started with a gut feeling that something was off, and then it spiraled into a full-blown nightmare I'm still trying to process. My wife, Lisa, and I had been married for about 8 years. We seemed happy enough, at least on the surface. She was beautiful, confident, and always had a sharp tongue for anyone who dared cross her. She loved to throw around her money, shopping sprees, designer clothes, the latest gadgets. I guess that's what I liked about her initially. She had this bitchy, take-no-prisoners attitude that made her stand out. But underneath all that, I thought we had a solid marriage. I worked hard, she managed the household, and we had 2 kids, a house in the suburbs, and a decent life. But about 6 months ago, I started noticing weird things. Small stuff at first: missed calls, late nights, unexplained absences. Lisa would brush it off, say she was working late or out with her friends. She'd get defensive if I pressed her, accuse me of being paranoid or insecure. I let it go, thinking maybe I was overreacting. After all, trust is the foundation, right? But then I started catching little inconsistencies in her stories, things that didn't add up. One night I was scrolling through our bank account online because I was trying to get a handle on our finances. We're pretty meticulous about money, have to be with 2 kids and a mortgage. That's when I saw it. A transfer of $250, $0 from our joint account, just gone. I almost choked. It was labeled as a business investment, but I knew Lisa didn't run any business. I was stunned. How do you just siphon that kind of money without me noticing? I dug deeper, and that's when I found out she'd been funneling it into an offshore account hidden from me, from the IRS, from everyone. I immediately felt sick. My mind raced. How could she do this? Why? I looked at the transaction details. She transferred the money over several months, slowly, carefully. I was furious and hurt, but it got worse. That same night, I found out she'd been having an affair with my supposed best friend, Mark. I saw texts, flirty, sexual, downright disgusting, between them. They'd been sneaking around for months, probably since the money started disappearing. The betrayal was staggering. My wife, the woman I trusted with everything, was not only stealing from me but also screwing my best friend behind my back. How dumb was I to not see it sooner? I'd always suspected Lisa was a bit bitchy, manipulative even, but I never thought she'd cheat, steal, and lie so blatantly. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, then kicked when I was down. All these years, I thought we had a good life, and now I was looking at a complete betrayal that shattered everything I believed in. I knew I had to confront her, but I also needed to figure out what to do with the money, the house, everything. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about the fallout, the legal mess, the emotional wreckage. I'd never been this angry in my life, but beneath that anger was a deep, aching sadness. How did she manage to lie so convincingly? How did she think she could get away with it? I felt like I was losing my mind trying to process it all. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at the screen showing her recent transactions, her texts, her lies. I knew I couldn't stay silent. I had to do something. I had to find a way to get even, to make her pay for what she'd done. But at the same time, I was scared, scared of losing everything, scared of what the future held. I didn't know how to start, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The cracks in our marriage had become cracks in my soul. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My head was pounding and my stomach was in knots. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. For years, I'd built this image of us, me working hard to provide, Lisa managing the house, the kids, our little world. But now it all seemed fake. The trust I had in her was shattered, and I was left staring at a future I couldn't recognize. I spent hours going over the evidence I'd found. The offshore account details, the texts, the bank transfers. It was clear she'd been planning this for months. I felt betrayed, but I also felt something else, something darker. A burning need to get even, to make her understand that she couldn't just steal from me and walk away. I needed a plan. My first move was to contact my lawyer. I knew I had to be careful. Lisa was bitchy enough to lie her way out of anything, and I didn't trust her to tell the truth. I also knew I couldn't let her spin some sob story about how I was abusive or neglectful, like she'd already started doing in her divorce filings. She's always been good at twisting things to her advantage, playing the victim, making herself seem innocent. That's her game: lie, manipulate, and blame everyone else. I told my lawyer everything I'd discovered. He was surprised but not shocked. Apparently, Lisa's been hiding money for years, and this offshore account was just the tip of the iceberg. He advised me to get a forensic accountant involved, to trace every dollar she'd taken, and to prepare for a tough legal battle. We also discussed the possibility of exposing her affair. I had enough evidence to prove she'd been unfaithful, and I was considering using that in court to show her true character. But I wasn't just thinking about the legal side. I wanted to hurt her back. I wanted her to feel what I felt: betrayed, humiliated, crushed. I started researching ways to uncover her hidden assets further. I hired a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. Within days, he reported back, Lisa had opened multiple offshore accounts in the Caribbean, in places I'd never even heard of. She was serious about hiding this money. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act. She was bitchy, dismissive, and manipulative. She told me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that I was making things up. She claimed I was abusive because I'd raised my voice a couple of times when I confronted her. She accused me of being controlling, jealous, and insecure. Every time I tried to get her to admit the truth, she'd turn it around, call me unstable, accuse me of emotional abuse. I could see she was trying to paint herself as the victim, as always, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I saw through her lies. I knew she was trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage, to get the house, the savings, everything. And she was doing it with that bitchy smirk on her face, like she knew she was winning. That made me even angrier. I'd never been a vengeful person, but I realized I had to be smart now. I couldn't just confront her blindly, I had to outsmart her. The worst part was feeling helpless. I was angry, yes, but also deeply hurt. I'd trusted her with my life, my secrets, my money, and she'd betrayed me in the worst way possible. I kept asking myself how I could have missed the signs, how I could have been so blind. Was I that bad at reading people? Or was she just that good at hiding who she really was? I looked at our bank statements again, trying to find any clues I might have missed. That's when I noticed something strange. A recent transfer, this time not just the offshore accounts, but a small sum going to a different account in Switzerland. It was suspicious because she'd told me she was done with her affair, that Mark was out of her life. But here was proof she was still hiding money, still lying, still playing her game. I felt a mixture of rage and despair. I didn't want to just walk away, not without fighting. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done, to understand that her actions had consequences. I knew I had to act fast, gather everything I could, and prepare for what was coming next. This was no longer just about a cheating wife. It was about a woman who'd stolen my trust, my money, and almost my sanity. And so I sat there, staring at the glowing screen, planning my next move. I knew she'd lie, manipulate, and try to turn the tables on me, but I also knew I had enough evidence now to expose her. The game was on, and I was ready to fight for what was left of my life, because if I didn't, she'd take everything, including my dignity. After spending the weekend digging through all the evidence I could find, I realized I needed to step up my game. Lisa was good at lying, but her lies were starting to crumble under the weight of the truth. I couldn't just confront her blindly. I had to have a plan, a way to catch her in the act if she tried to cover her tracks or spin some story to save herself. I decided to go all in. I hired a private investigator who specialized in financial investigations and infidelity. It was a gamble, but I needed hard proof, more than just her suspicious transactions. I needed her to slip up, to give herself away. I also contacted a forensic accountant, someone who could trace every dollar she'd hidden, especially the offshore accounts. I was determined to make her realize I wasn't going to be played for a fool anymore. The private investigator started tailing Lisa discreetly. It didn't take long before he came back with some shocking news. Lisa was still meeting up with Mark, the so-called best friend, and they had been sneaking around even more than I initially thought. They'd been meeting in hotels, going out to fancy restaurants, and even taking trips together. I was furious. All those nights she claimed she was working late, she was with him, sex, lies, and probably more money changing hands in secret. One day I got a call from the investigator. He followed her to a luxury hotel downtown. She'd been there for hours and Mark was with her. That was the final straw. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I had enough to confront her directly, and I needed to do it face to face with everything laid out in front of her. That evening I came home early from work, hiding my emotions behind a cold exterior. I found her in our bedroom just finishing packing a bag. She looked surprised to see me, but that smirk was still on her face, the one she always used when she thought she was winning. I could feel my blood boiling. I told her I knew everything: the affair, the money, the offshore accounts, the lies. Her face twisted into a mask of annoyance and disdain. She tried to deny everything at first, but I pulled out the evidence: the bank statements, the offshore account details, the hotel receipts from the investigator. Her face drained of color. She stammered, then snapped back with a barrage of excuses. "You're paranoid. I was just stressed. It's not what it looks like." But I wasn't buying it. I knew her game now. I told her I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore. I told her I was filing for divorce and that I was going to expose her for the lying, cheating, money-hiding bitch she was. Her reaction was priceless. She looked furious, then suddenly started crying, claiming I was hurting her, that I was abusing her emotionally. She called me controlling, jealous, and said I was the real problem in our marriage. That was her typical line: turn the tables, make herself the victim, and try to manipulate the situation. But I didn't care. I'd already made up my mind. I was done pretending everything was okay. I told her she was done lying and that she was going to face the consequences of her actions. I had already contacted my lawyer and the forensic accountant, and I was going to make sure she paid for her betrayal, financially and emotionally. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything: her lies, her sneers, the money she stole, the affair she was still hiding. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and relief. Anger because she'd betrayed me so profoundly. Sadness because I realized I'd lost the woman I thought I knew. But also relief because I finally had the truth, and I knew I could fight back. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I started drafting a plan to take back control of my life. I knew she'd fight me tooth and nail in court, trying to hide more money or spin her lies. I had to be prepared. I also knew I couldn't let her get away with the house or the savings without a fight. I'd been betrayed in the worst way possible, but I was determined to come out of this stronger. I'd learned that trust is fragile, and sometimes the people closest to you can turn out to be your worst enemies. But I also learned that if you stay vigilant and don't let them get away with it, you can fight back and win. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, financial hunts, and emotional exhaustion. I couldn't believe how deep Lisa had gone into her web of lies. I had always thought she was clever, manipulative maybe, but I underestimated just how far she'd go to cover her tracks. The offshore accounts, the trips, the secret meetings. She'd been planning this whole betrayal for months, maybe even years. I spent every spare moment with my lawyer and the forensic accountant. We uncovered more hidden assets: the Swiss account I mentioned earlier, plus a few smaller accounts in the Cayman Islands. Lisa had even set up shell companies to funnel money through, making it nearly impossible to trace without their help. It was like a game of chess, and I was the pawn being slowly cornered. But I was determined not to go down without a fight. Meanwhile, Lisa was doing her best to keep up appearances. She was bitchy, dismissive, and never short of snide comments. She called me paranoid, accused me of trying to control her, and insisted I was just jealous of her success. She played the victim card relentlessly, claiming I was abusive for raising my voice once or twice during arguments. I knew it was all a big act, her way of trying to sway the court to make me look bad. She even spun stories about how I was neglectful, controlling, and emotionally abusive, classic manipulation tactics. But I'd done my homework. I had the evidence. I had the proof of her affair, the hidden money, the offshore accounts. I was ready to fight for everything: our house, our savings, the little bit of dignity I had left. I also started collecting all the texts, emails, and photos of her with Mark. I knew this would be crucial in court, not just for the money but to show her true character. One thing I didn't expect was how quickly Lisa's attitude shifted when I started pushing back. She went from confident and bitchy to desperate and frantic. She'd call me names, threaten to ruin me, even accuse me of beating her, completely false, but she knew how to push my buttons. I stayed calm. I knew I had the upper hand now, but I also understood that she'd try to manipulate the situation to her advantage. I also discovered she'd been secretly working with a divorce attorney from the beginning, probably to ensure she'd get the house and most of the money. But I wasn't going down that easy. I hired my own lawyer, someone aggressive and experienced in financial crimes and infidelity cases. We prepared a detailed dossier to show her deception, her lies, and her attempts to hide assets. I wanted her to see I was serious, that I wasn't just going to roll over and let her walk away with everything. What hurt the most was realizing how much I'd trusted her. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I didn't see the betrayal coming. I replayed every conversation, every moment I thought was normal, and now it all felt like a lie. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry, so angry that I had to fight back with everything I had. I wanted her to feel the pain she'd caused me, but I also knew I had to stay focused. The legal process was brutal. Lisa was trying to spin her lies in court, claiming I was an abusive, controlling husband who was jealous of her success. She insisted she deserved half the house because she contributed to the marriage, even though she'd been secretly siphoning money and cheating on me. She cried, she yelled, and she tried to manipulate the judge, but I had the evidence and I made sure it all came out. One of the most shocking moments came when the forensic accountant uncovered even more hidden assets, accounts in offshore banks, investments she never disclosed, and even a few properties in her name she'd kept secret. It was clear she'd been planning her escape for years. I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak. How could she do this to me, to our family? The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was gone, replaced by someone who only cared about money, sex, and her own selfish desires. I remember sitting in the courtroom, watching her testify and feeling an overwhelming sense of betrayal. I'd never felt so powerless and furious at the same time. I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine, but I also knew I'd need to be strategic. This wasn't just about getting her out of my life. It was about exposing her and making sure she paid for her lies. I realized a hard truth: trust is fragile, and once broken, it's nearly impossible to repair. But I also saw that I still had some control over my future, over my money, and over how I responded to her manipulations. I was determined to come out of this stronger, even if it meant losing her and everything we'd built. Because at the end of the day, no amount of money or material things could replace the pain of betrayal. But I was going to make sure she paid for her treachery, one way or another. The court proceedings dragged on for what felt like an eternity. Every day I was met with new surprises: more lies, more hidden accounts, more manipulation from Lisa. She was desperate now, her bitchy smirk replaced with a look of panic when she realized how much I had on her. She tried every trick in the book, crying, yelling, accusing me of being the bad guy. But I had the evidence, and I made sure it all saw the light of day. One day, my lawyer handed me the final report from the forensic accountant. It confirmed what I'd suspected. Lisa had been hiding millions. Multiple offshore accounts, shell companies, and investments she'd kept completely secret. I couldn't believe how deep her deception went. It was like she'd built a secret empire behind my back. My blood boiled. I knew this was the moment I had to act decisively. I confronted Lisa in court with everything laid out. I presented the bank statements, the offshore accounts, the hotel receipts, the texts, everything. Her face twisted into a mask of rage and despair. She tried to deny it all, but the evidence was irrefutable. The judge looked at her sternly, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. Her attempt to spin her lies backfired spectacularly. The judge saw through her manipulations, and I could tell she was losing her grip. She kept trying to claim she was the victim, that I was controlling, that she deserved half the house because she contributed to the marriage. But I knew better. I knew she'd been stealing from me, cheating on me, and lying about everything. I felt a strange sense of relief, like finally I was exposing the truth and reclaiming what was mine. The judge ruled in my favor on most counts. The house, the savings, the offshore accounts, everything that could be traced back to her, was awarded to me. She was ordered to pay back the stolen money, plus penalties for hiding assets. But the worst part was yet to come. I had learned about even more hidden wealth, properties in her name that she kept secret, investments she'd never disclosed, and a trust fund set up for her own benefit. The judge ordered a full forensic audit of her finances, which meant she was at her wit's end. Lisa's bitchy attitude turned into outright fury. She screamed at me in court, calling me all sorts of names, accusing me of destroying her life. She claimed I was abusive, jealous, and controlling, classic tactics to make herself look innocent. But I stayed calm. I knew that her lies wouldn't hold up anymore. I had everything I needed. After the court, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief mixed with exhaustion. Finally, I had justice. But I also knew that Lisa wouldn't go quietly. She'd fight me any way she could, even if it meant trying to manipulate the legal system further. I prepared myself for more battles. She'd try to appeal, hide more assets, or even try to ruin my reputation. But I was ready. The hardest part was the aftermath, realizing how much I'd been blind to her true nature. I'd trusted her with everything, and she'd repaid me with lies, betrayal, and theft. It hurt to think about the years wasted on someone who only cared about herself. But I also learned a lot about myself, that I was stronger than I thought, that I could fight for what's right, and that sometimes the truth has to come out no matter how painful. Now I'm rebuilding my life. I've cut all ties with her, moved out of the house, and started over. The financial mess is still being sorted, but I have hope. I've learned that betrayal cuts deep, but honesty and persistence can cut even deeper. I don't regret standing up for myself, even if it's been one of the hardest experiences I've ever gone through. And if there's one thing I'd tell anyone in a similar situation, trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and don't let them get away with it. Because in the end, justice might be slow, but it's worth fighting for. Looking back now, I realize how much this whole ordeal changed me. I used to think I was pretty good at reading people, at figuring out what was real and what was just a facade. Turns out, I was way too trusting. Lisa's betrayal was a brutal wake-up call, one that cost me a lot emotionally, financially, and even in my sense of self. But it also taught me something valuable. I'm stronger than I believed, especially when everything's falling apart. Getting through the legal battles, the lies, and the betrayal didn't just drain me. It forced me to confront my own limits. I had to stay sharp, patient, and relentless. I learned to trust my instincts and to follow the evidence, even when it was uncomfortable. I also learned that people can hide their true nature behind a pretty face or a bitchy attitude, and sometimes the only way to see the truth is to dig deep and expose their lies. Now, I'm slowly rebuilding my life. I've moved out of the house, started therapy to deal with the emotional scars, and I'm focusing on my kids. They're resilient. Thankfully, they didn't fully understand what was happening, but I want to give them a better example of strength and integrity. I've also become more cautious, more aware of red flags, and more careful about who I trust. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, I'd say this: trust your gut, get your evidence, and don't let them manipulate you into silence. The truth will come out, but only if you're willing to fight for it. No amount of money, no amount of material things can replace the damage betrayal causes, but standing up for yourself, exposing the lies, and holding them accountable can help you reclaim your dignity. Finally, I've learned that even in the darkest moments, there's a kind of clarity that comes with facing the truth. It's painful, it's messy, but it's necessary. I'm still healing, Still learning how to trust again, but I know now that I have the strength to move forward, better, wiser, and more cautious than ever before. And that's what matters most.